Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates agreement on recovery of assets and cash stashed away in UAE by Nigerians takes off next month. Federal government closes 2017 budget with capital spending in excess of 1.5 trillion naira. Tomorrow is federal government's open day to mark the end of the first phase of the Economic and Growth Plan ERGP Focus Labs. Plus, Central Bank of Nigeria and the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation threaten a non-compliant banks board over money laundering. This is Business Express reaching you from the network service of the NTA. I am Amina Nujaim. Thanks for joining us. In the news today, Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates UAE's agreement on recovery of assets and cash stashed away in UAE by Nigeria takes off next month. Collaboration among heads of anti-corruption agencies in Commonwealth countries will also be stepped up as Nigeria hosts the 8th annual general meeting and conference for the heads of anti-corruption agencies in the Commonwealth of Africa. At the end of the weekend, officials of the UAE and Nigeria exchanged instruments of ratification on judicial agreement signed between both governments in 2016 in Abu Dhabi. The agreement will now take effect from the June 13. Nigeria, in January 19, 2016, signed 6 agreements with UAE following a state visit by President Muhammadu Buhari. The pact includes judicial agreement on extradition, transfer of sentenced persons, mutual legal assistance on criminal matters, and mutual legal assistance on criminal and commercial matters, which involves the recovery and repatriation of stolen wealth. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, and the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation have approved new administrative sanctions regime against banks and their staff who fail to comply with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing regulation. The new rule signed by CBN Director of Financial Policy and Regulations, Kelvin Amugu, requires that Board of Financial Institutions, Director or officer responsible for ensuring anti-money laundering compliance with any relevant provisions of these regulations has been penalized in 3 consecutive examination cycles, and the breach continues. The CBN may suspend or remove the board, director or officer of that institution. The framework released at the weekend also spelled out dissuasive monetary sanctions against banks and other financial institutions, as well as their staff and board that fail to comply with the set rules. The new rule, the CBN said, is in line with the requirements of the Financial Action Task Force. Recommendations 35 on effective repatriated and dissuasive sanctions and the Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa 2007 mutual evaluation recommendations that Nigeria's anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism sanctions regime should be reviewed. Nigeria will be closing the 2017 budget with capital spending in excess of 1.5 trillion naira. Finance Minister Kemi Adeosun, in a series of tweets, noted that the amount is higher than what was achieved in 2016 budget. She also added that government is looking forward to the passage of the 2018 budget by the National Assembly. The Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NTA, in its quarterly review puts figures distributed by the 3 tiers of government in the first quarter of 2018 at 1.9 trillion naira. In a moment, we will be discussing the facts. behind the numbers. Joining me is Dr. Oji Ogbonnaya Oji. He is the Director of Communications and Advocacy, NTA. Glad to have you join us on Business Express.
Thank you very much.
Today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Now, let's start this way. What's the interest of NTA in FAC allocations, and how does this relate to your mandate?
Well, this is consistent with our mandate. One of our mandates is to track the use, allocation, and application of oil and gas revenues. And if you check, you'll find that over 70% of the revenues we're talking about that have accrued, that have been allocated to various tiers of government, most of them in one way or the other, were derived from oil, gas, and mining industry. So NTA's mandate covers exactly how we utilize these funds to connect with the development of infrastructure, social, and then poverty reduction issues.
Now, you seem to get your information from government. Now, how do you validate that the information you have aside government sources?
Well, we are strategically invited to FAC meetings, the meetings of the Federation Allocation Accounts Committee, and monthly meetings of FAC. NTA attends that meeting. So we are right there when this share and allocation of the resources are made. So we get the information right at the source. Beside that, we get this, we also rely on the information from the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, Ministry of Finance, and then also information provided by states, or the states that are also the other tiers of government that share from the allocation of the resources. So our information is raw, and the integrity of our data is right from the source.
Now, talking about integrity and transparency, how would you say the publication of this report affects and supports public interests?
Well, the citizens need to know, because sometimes governments at all levels are, expected to provide water, provide electricity, provide jobs, provide infrastructure, and sometimes most of these governments also complain that the resources available are not adequate to meet citizens' expectations. But when we provide this information, the citizens are then to be able to judge if what they are seeing on ground also match the revenues that are being provided. That's why we go specifically to say this amount of money has been made available. This is the share that, for instance, in our release, we were able to provide the information that between January and March this year, the federal government alone, the three tiers of government shared 1.9 trillion naira. Then how much of this did the states get? January to March, we provided that information that in January alone, 655.2 billion was shared. In February, 635.6 billion was shared. And in March, 647.4 billion was shared. If you add all of them, you will see that the federal government alone got 812.8 billion, while the states got 683.4 billion. So when we have these facts on the ground, the citizens are able to interrogate the issues, be able to find out if the services that they expect are provided, and if really the governments complain that there's no money is real. So most times when governments are expected to provide everything, and you see that the resources they have are not exactly adequate to provide. So the citizens are there to make their own informed judgment.
Okay, you've started breaking down the numbers already.
Yes.
I'm going to draw your attention to the publication that says 1.123 trillion was shared among the 3 tiers of government. I want us to look at it in the implication of revenue profile of the 3 tiers of government as compared to 2 years ago. Because the data says Akwa Ibom got 50.44 billion, while states like Oshun, looking at your report, says 4.99 billion. There's a huge disparity.
I agree with you, but it also shows that everyone to his ability, everyone to his need. And you could say that some states that produce oil and have more oil or wells, have more sharing, are higher in terms of derivation. Those states appear to get more money. Akwa Ibom currently tops the chart in terms of the 9 oil producing states, in terms of the quantum of oil and gas that are produced from their states. So when you think, when the share is computed along that line, they are most likely to get more money than a state like Osho. I'm not quite sure that Osho produces any oil. So you could see, and Akwa Ibom will be costing home with about 50-point-something billion naira, whereas you have 4-point-something from Osho State. Osho actually is in the bottom in terms of the share and allocation. So the more oil producing states have more money, access, they share more money. But then that also brings us to the issue of what do you do when you look at what is available to you and there's no other way to augment. It challenges most states to look inwards and see what they can do to be able to augment in terms of internally generated revenue.
Let me come in here talking about revenue. Your publication also disclosed that projected revenue is less in 18 states by 40% when looking at budgets. Let's talk about that.
Well, the projection is that is about less 40% of the budget. We are saying that in states like Adamawa, Akwa Ibom, Anambra, Bauchi, Benue, Borno, Cross River, and the Ebonyi states, Imo, Katsina, Kebbi, Kwara, Ogun, Osun, Oyo, Plateau, virtually about 18 states, Sokoto, Zamfara, including Cross River, the budget they have published that they are going to implement, if you check the amount of money they are going to get from federal allocations, they are 40% less. So that means they are 40% in deficit. That means they have to do make extra effort to find 40% of the budget they have projected they are going to spend in 2018 to be able to meet the specific needs that they have promised their people they are going to do. So it challenges them to not just come to Abuja to rely on federal allocations, but to look inwards on what they could possibly do to improve internal revenue generation.
Now that brings me to another area. With an increase of 37% shared the same period last year, what is NTA projecting?
We project higher revenues even for for the rest of the quarter, because the oil price currently is hovering around 70%. This is far higher than the projected budget benchmark. So we expect we project that even in the next quarter the share will be higher, but it won't be that high as to be able to make each of these states to relax or to think that it's a boom. Because if you still check that the highest point that we've ever reached in terms of rising oil, the rise of price of oil in the international market was in 2013. And in 2013, what we have disbursed so far is still 25.6%, lower than 2.6 trillion disbursed during the same period in 2013.
Mr. Oji Obonaya Oji, Director Communications and Advocacy of NTA. It's been a pleasure having you on Business Express
Thank
today.
you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Now, moving on. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation on Sunday announced the appointment of Group General Manager Malam Mele Kyari as Nigeria's national representative at the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries (OPEC). Kyari is the GGM in Crude Oil Marketing Division at NNPC. Next is a graphic representation of commodities as compiled by Bosedi Abel. Now, more news. More than 5 million new taxpayers were added to Nigeria's tax base in the last 2 years. Minister of Finance Kemi Adeosun disclosed this at the weekend when she briefed the press. She also added that the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, and other tax authorities at the state level are doing a great deal of work on expanding the tax base and enforcement of tax payments.
Nigeria needs growth now. It needs jobs now. And the way you can accelerate job creation and growth in an economy is to provide the enabling infrastructure, improve the ease of doing business, encourage the private sector to thrive, increase your tax base so that you have more money in the public sector to then invest in education and health and create jobs in those sectors. And that in itself has a multiplier effect on growth.
Adeosun urged Nigerians to trust government to deliver on its promise of improving the economy and providing sustainable infrastructure development. I am now being joined by Oluwaseun Quadri. He is a tax expert and will be speaking to the issues around Nigeria's current tax revenue drive. Welcome to Business Express.
Thank you very much for having me.
Looking at the data, we have 5 million more taxpayers since the campaign began.
Yes.
Your thoughts?
If we look at where we're coming from, I mean, we should start asking questions. Where were we coming from? Where are we now? And where are we going to? Within the past 2 years, over 5 million more taxpayers have been added to the database. That is actually very commendable. And I give kudos to the efforts of the presidency, the Minister of Finance, and also the administration of Babatunde Fowler, and also all other tax authorities working studiously to make this possible. But we need to start asking questions. Where were we? We were in 14 million, we added 5 million. How many active taxpayers do we have in Nigeria? Economically active individuals, we should be in the tax net. We have over 70 million individuals. We should be in the tax net. And if we have just added 5 million, it still means we have a very long way to go. So yes, we have been doing a lot. We are working towards it, but we have a very long way to go. And I will encourage the institutions involved to use more data, because big data is very big. And if you look, for example, you and I, we have BVN numbers, and you can see how that policy was so fast in implementing. You know, we can also adopt something like that for TIN numbers. You ensure that individuals cannot have access to government services without TIN numbers. You ensure that when individuals want to open accounts in banks or companies, they must have TIN numbers. You know, we need to be more holistic, but we are doing a great job so far.
We're doing a great job, which means there's hope in
Absolutely.
the long run.
Yes, there is.
The minister did make a comment that tax to GDP ratio will rise.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Looking at all the efforts, because I must commend the Minister of Finance. They have been working assiduously to ensure that the tax landscape experiences a revolution, which is actually unprecedented. So since this dispensation, we have seen a lot of unprecedented measures that has been taken to ensure that the tax landscape is taken from where it is, because we are currently at 6%. The GDP ratio for tax is at 6%, and which is among the lowest in the whole world. Just Ghana by our side is about 16%. Okay. So we need to do a lot of work. It is possible, and with all the measures that are put in place, I believe we'll be able to achieve that.
Now, talking about measures, the whistleblower policy seems to be complemented by VATES.
Yes. It's quite interesting that the whistleblowers policy can be extended to VATES.
And you know, it has been extended.
It has been extended. I know the VATES program has been extended, which was advocated by stakeholders, you know, for it to coincide with the period in which companies in which their tax year ends, their financial year ends by December last year, to pay their taxes by June. So it will encourage a lot of people to comply. And the whistleblower policy, interestingly, you wouldn't believe it would yield a lot of results with respect to exposing tax evaders, but it is working, you know, and I would actually commend the people that thought about that policy. But we need to do much more with respect to that policy by backing it up with a legal framework in order for it to be very more effective and efficient. That
brings me to my next question.
Yes.
What do these new figures mean to the accounting books of Nigeria?
What it means is that we have generated more income from unprecedented ideas, and it means we have to do more. It means that there are a lot of companies that are actually evading taxes. It means we have to be more holistic in our approach with respect to ensuring that every company pay what is due and with at the right time. So it's quite a good effort, and it's also good for our books because it gives us more disposable income for infrastructure and also to help stimulate economic growth.
Oluwaseun Kadiri, a tax expert, thank you for joining us on Business.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
The Nigerian stock market made a marginal rebound on Friday, the 11th of May, but gains recorded were not enough to upturn the negative trend on the week. Muplang Dakok has details.
The NSE All-Share Index in the week ended Friday, 11th May, depreciated by 0.48% to close the week at 41,022.31, while market capitalization dropped to 14.860 trillion naira. A total of 1.586 billion shares, valued at 25.992 billion naira in 21,115 deals, were traded in the week by investors on the floor of the exchange. The financial services industry led the activity chart with 1.360 billion shares worth 20.378 billion naira in 11,936 deals. The consumer goods industry was next with 52.727 million shares worth 2.125 billion naira in 3,301 deals. The third place was occupied by the oil and gas industry with a turnover of 50 million shares worth 783.716 million naira in 2,153 deals. Trading in the top three equities measured by volume recorded by FCMB, GT Bank and Zenith Bank accounted for 745 million shares valued at 17.5 billion naira in 2,757 deals. Top price gainers were led by Cement Company of Northern Nigeria, Veritas Capital Assurance PLC and Etana PLC. A total of 7,647 units of federal government bonds valued at 8.047 million naira were traded in the week. Also traded during the week were a total of 444,190 units of exchange-traded products, ETPs, valued at 2.514 million naira.
Moplang Dakok there. Now, as markets around the globe open for the week, Dow Jones futures are up as Trump helped ease trade war fears. Musa Abakar has an outlook of global stocks.
African equities closed mixed Friday. South Africa JSE 40 gained 0.64%. Tone index climbed 0.59%. Namibia overall added 1.24%. And Ghana GSE declined 0.20 to close 3,455.81. U.S. major bourses finished with sizable weekly gains, with Dow Jones Industrial Average closing 24,831 to post weekly gain of 2.3%. S&P and Nasdaq Composite both added 2.4 and 2.7% for the week. In Europe, FTSE closed 7,724.55 at 2.1% gain for the week, while CAC and DAX declined 4.01 and 0.17% at the end of Friday's session. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gained 312 points to close the week at 31,122.06. Japan's Nikkei gained 1.16%, while Shanghai Composite declined 0.35%.
Now a look at international currency markets. How are they faring? That's it on today's edition of Business Express. The program returns on Wednesday. I am Amina Nujain.